on 7th Circle Gaming. We're in the world of Greek mythology and Achilles, Legends Untold. And after a bit of full disclosure, we'll take a look at a couple of screenshots. Of course, if you'd like to read through this, you're welcome to it. Please pause the video now, otherwise we'll move on and look at the screenshots. Now, in our first screenshot, what we like to share with you is what the game world looks like, and we talk about the user interface. The game world is a pretty generic dark fantasy world that could be set anytime between the mythological period and around 1200, 1000 CE. It really isn't all that specific. So then on to the user interface. The user interface, or UI for short, is centered around two major areas, that being the top left and the bottom center of the screen. At the top left-hand corner, we have the mini-map. And at the bottom center of the screen, from left to right, we have the inventory items, then the character indicators, including health, stamina, and energy indicators, followed by, at the bottom center right, the special ability icons as well as the cooldown timers. So then in our second screenshot, what we're going to share with you is what the upgrade trees look like, or at least one of them. We do apologize for the minor spoilers of the fact that there are some upgrades that have already been researched. That aside, what we do want to draw your attention to is the fact that for any upgrade that the player is looking at potentially unlocking, there are a significant amount of statistics available for players to optimize and analyze. In our next screenshot, we're taking a look at the third major aspect of the game, which is the inventory management page. And what we would draw your attention to here in particular are the fact that the game certainly draws some of its artistic inspiration from the Hollywood film Troy. That aside, we do want to point out that all of the items that the screen shows have statistics attached to them. So, moving right along to our last screenshot, what we're looking at here is the crafting interface. Of course, the game has a crafting mechanic. However, it cannot be done necessarily anywhere. It must be done only at a specifically notated crafting table. So, with all of the screenshots out of the way, that moves us on to our first proper chapter, which is, as always, immersion. Here the game has earned a 5 out of 15. As we saw earlier, the game will be attempting to utilize presentation to get players invested into the world. Achilles, Legends Untold is presented in an isometric perspective, which the player does not have control of the camera over. The world as a whole is a pretty generic dark fantasy world. As we said earlier, it could be set anywhere between the mythic period and around 12 to 1300 CE. Secondly, the game will utilize challenge to get players invested into the world. In the specific items that it will utilize are stamina-based combat and an alternate perspective which represents some light puzzle solving. The game calls this Hades vision, although it could easily be termed infrared or any number of other words, or wooey woo vision. It really doesn't matter. Thirdly, the game will utilize statistics focus to get players invested into the world, in the sense that the in-game objects and upgrades or perks have statistics attached to them. Now, it might seem as though, from what the screenshots you saw earlier indicate, that there is some player agency available. However, the decision whether or not to equip an item or unlock a skill is much more driven by the statistics attached rather than any appearance, so the game doesn't earn any credit for player agency. Moving on then to difficulty. Here the game has earned a 3 out of 15. The game certainly suggests that a gamepad be used, although it does admit that a mouse and keyboard can be used if the player prefers. However, from our evaluation sessions, we have uncovered that a mouse and keyboard may be more challenging to utilize, as it seems as though the player needs to be thinking about their movements about a second or two before they need to make them, because of some possible delay in processing the action. The user interface can be somewhat busy depending on what the player is looking at, which is another way of saying that the game throws a lot of statistics at the player and expects them to understand them very quickly. The user interface suggests that some skills that the player hasn't already unlocked may be available to them, which can be confusing for players that aren't ready for it. The skill tree is fairly complicated. However, it is kind of statistics driven, but it is not very well described. Finally, the game may have hidden statistics or it may scale the difficulty relative to the player level. We can't necessarily speak 100% to that, but it does seem as though that is the case. So then, moving on to lasting appeal. Here the game has earned a 2 out of 15. Although we would caveat everything that we're about to say with the fact that it is an early access game, so everything is subject to change. There is at present no DLC available, and there is no mod support. Both of these could change as the game matures after final release. The game does seem to prefer a short gameplay session over a very long one, so maybe spend around 20 minutes per play session. So then, where does Achilles Legends Untold stand overall? Overall, the game has earned a 3.33 out of 15. The difficulty is seemingly random, as we said before. There may be some difficulty scaling relative to the player level. Some opponents are more difficult than others. Whether or not that is intentional or accidental, we can't necessarily say, but it does seem to be all over the place. Now onto a couple of highly subjective statements to round out the video, so please have those grains of salt ready. The player character is seemingly non-unique. It could just as easily as it is Achilles be Aeneas, Odysseus, Ajax, Menelaus, or any other character from Greek mythology, although in our opinion it might work more accurately or more effectively as Odysseus than Achilles. The game world is pretty generic. It really doesn't scream out mythic Greece or any other particular time period. It's only the references to Greek mythology that a few players would necessarily recognize that really points out it as Greek mythology. On the other hand, some of the battles in the game are enjoyable, but whether or not that is enough to keep the game installed on a hard drive or get players interested in that is up to them. So, with all of that said, there isn't anything more to say about Achilles Legends Untold. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. And from 7th Circle Gaming, goodbye.